Hi, welcome. I'm just going to let a few more attendees come in. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Midnight Club at the Battery. I'm Arabella DeLuco. I am the CEO and founder of weexcel.org, which is the nonprofit that has partnered up with the Midnight Club to help you host this webinar today. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what WeExcel does. Our mission is to unite and empower through diverse and inclusive storytelling. We've done multiple original shows, and we also have an original podcast that we launched this week featuring diverse creators and creatives from all over the world. But we started with our very own a filmmaker local here in San Francisco. His name is Guillermo Gomez, and I'm going to share with you our link to that podcast. And Guillermo is very special because he has this superpower of being a filmmaker with Asperger's. And he is also going to be one of our Excellence in Residence Fellow for 2021. And the fellowship this year, we're focusing on neurodiverse creatives. So I hope that you enjoy that. And next week, we'll also have another podcast dropping on Tuesday, and that's with filmmaker Rena Dutt, and she is currently in production for a new short film. And also, just to let you know, we also do some exclusive screenings of movies. And last year we did an screening of Coded Bias, which is now being shown on Netflix. So make sure you check that out. I had an interview with Shalini Kantaya, the filmmaker, for that really cool documentary. And now, with no further ado, let's begin the show. Here we have Colleen Kerlin. She is the Director of Programs at the Battery. Colleen, take it away.
Thanks, Arabella. Hi, everyone. You've probably seen my face in many rectangles here on Zoom, but I'm really excited to introduce tonight's event. You all may or may not be aware, but this is the second installment in our Future of Storytelling event that we've partnered with on the Midnight Club. Tonight, we're focused all about technology. Ideas like how big data impacts cooperative storytelling, gaming, and immersive storytelling. And I know we have a really amazing panel put together, but it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator and host, Asmara Barakai. She is a teacher at Chapman, a professor at Chapman American University in Princeton, among others. She's also a filmmaker and received grants and awards and screenings at festivals around the world. She's the founder of two production companies, the first of which, Cinema Belongs to Us, and an online digital studio startup called KINOVAT, Inc., which is based here in San Francisco. And so I'm going to pass it over to Asmara to introduce our panelists and start tonight's event.
Thank you so much, Colleen, and thank you for your support for the Midnight Club and the ability to host these events. I'm really excited about tonight, and I'm going to introduce the panel in just a second. First, I want to thank my other collaborators on the Midnight Club, Catherine Darwish and Divina Infusino, who put this together. The Midnight Club is an outgrowth of Creative Hub, which is a meetup at the Battery. And I started it last year, and it's been a pleasure during this whole quarantine to do these events and connect with people around storytelling. As we wait for a few more people to filter in, I wanted to share about a couple of arts activities, events happening. The first one I just learned about is called the Local Love Arts Festival, which is going to be at the Terra Gallery starting May 6th. It's a huge gallery space. It's going to be an in-person event, and I'll be showing a film there, which I'm really excited about. And it's a Bay Area show of what local artists have been doing during quarantine. It's arranged by Museo Pop, and there's going to be an outdoor area with like food and music. So I think it's going to be really the place to be. So check it out if you're interested. If you don't feel comfortable with in person, there's also a donation ticket, and I'll be happy to share my film with you. So I'll include my email in the chat. The second thing is, when I was in quarantine, one of my favorite activities was visiting my CSA and picking up all these beautiful local vegetables. I didn't know what a garlic scape was, for example, and there are these like beautiful pieces of garlic and all kinds of vegetables that I didn't know about. Unfortunately, this year there's not enough water and they're not able to do it. But a friend of mine has done a documentary about this whole water issue based around California, and particularly around some of these farms in Sebastopol where I live, and it's going to screen at the Tribeca Film Festival. And what I really value about this film is it doesn't just talk about all of the scary things that are happening about water, but a lot of solutions and ways we can manage water through these different local farming techniques. So I'm just going to give Emmett a minute here and post some things in the chat, and then we'll get started.
Great. Thank you. This is exciting. Thank you, Asmara, and everyone hosting this, all the amazing people in here, the panelists. Yeah, we'll share really quickly at the invitation of Asmara about this film that is really looking at the ways that our relationship with water is at the heart of so much of the environmental unraveling occurring right now. And so 4 years ago, I set out on something of a journey with water that was two-pronged. One was tracing LA's water source from its origin in the Eastern Sierras back to the city and exploring that. And then the other was looking for examples of how we could reshape our human systems and our cities and our agriculture around water differently in order to keep this planet habitable. And yeah, we're premiering at Tribeca in June, and an artist named Jacob Collier, who is just up for Album of the Year, a Grammy, is writing the original song, and he'll be performing live at the premiere. So it's a pretty bonkers, mind-blowing, special opportunity to mainstream a certain lens of relationship to water and what's possible for humanity. And yeah, I feel really humbled by it. And we need help crossing the finish line. So I just thought to put some links here of the trailer, the announcement from Tribeca, and a landing page for the film. If anyone was curious to learn more and contact me, and I'll include my email as well. So I think that's all there is to say. If I'm missing something, you can ask questions. I'll be around for 5 or 10 minutes if there's anything that comes up. So yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I hope this is a wonderful experience for you all tonight.
Thank you, Emmett. Okay, so let's get started. This is, yeah, as Colleen mentioned, the second in a series on the future of storytelling. And the first, we focus mainly on narrative. Of course, we'll be talking about narrative today as well, but we really wanted to sort of explore what do all of these different technological changes do to impact the way we tell stories and the way we interact with audiences, and how audiences impact and change the narrative too, through the ability we have to share videos and receive comments and all these kind of interactions that are going on. And also how immersive storytelling in VR is creating a different lens to experience what it's like to maybe be in someone else's skin and understand a story from a different perspective, and how that's being used in different sectors, also in the employment arena and workplaces to kind of smooth out relationships. And so these are all the topics we want to talk about today. It's going to be you know, an open discussion, and as Arabella said, you can put links, questions into the chat. We're also going to have a section at the end to ask questions as well. So let me begin. We're going to sort of divide it up into three sections. First, talking a little bit about story, and then about immersive, and at the end, gaming. So I'll introduce these amazing panelists we have, and thank you to them for sharing their time and knowledge and stories with us tonight. Karen Dufillo is an award-winning producer, executive, and gatherer of creatives and innovators. As executive producer at Google, Karen was instrumental in the creation of Google Spotlight Stories, an Oscar-nominated, multi-Emmy award-winning platform for original content with over 46 million views on their YouTube channel. At Pixar, she produced 2 Academy Award-winning shorts and oversaw franchise efforts and special projects for several Pixar feature film releases. Karen has been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, Variety, and Hollywood Reporter, and an invited speaker at South by Southwest, and Nancy Film Festival, AFI Fest, Women Tech Makers, Google I/O, and VR for Change. And most recently, Karen joined the executive board for Women in Animation, San Francisco Bay Area. So thank you, Karen, for being here. I'm going to introduce the other panelists and then pass the baton to you to kick us off. Ed Lance is an entertainment technology engineer, entrepreneur, and immersive experience designer. He left aerospace engineering in 1990 to transform old-style planetariums into 360-degree immersive visualization environments, designing over a dozen dome theaters worldwide, including the Library of Alexandria in Egypt and Papalote Museo del Niño in Mexico City. Ed founded Vortex Immersion Media in 2007 to bring VR, immersive, and interactive experiences into mainstream arts and entertainment. Vortex produced numerous interactive 360 experiences for theme parks, VR cinemas, and Fortune 500 companies, including AT&T, IBM, Live Nation, Microsoft, NBC Universal, Nestle, NFL, Nike, Nokia, Broadcast. The company also produced 360 VR concert dome venues as large as 60 meters in diameter, with a capacity of 3,000 more people for the world's top artists. Yes, I know they hosted an event for the founder of Minecraft, so looking forward to hear about that. So thank you, Ed, as well, for being here. Carl Ponto is a founder of Squash and Stretch Productions, which helps companies attract and maintain clients, inspire investors, and motivate employees through compelling storytelling. He's an animation and motion graphics expert with the mission to connect the world with stories. And as a gamer for 30 years, he has a really unique perspective on what's changed through the gaming industry, and also how that experience is. He'll give us a perspective on storytelling from the gaming perspective. So thank you. And Karen, if you want to begin.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I feel like I'm amongst this amazing company, and I'm not quite sure I'm gonna hold my own here. This is a lot of brain cells going on here. So again, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
How should you, Asmara, how would you like me to sort of launch this? Should I just start with a little bit of, should I introduce my dog?
Yeah, he's so cute, Claire.
Hopefully she'll behave herself.
I loved how we were talking about chaos and how storytelling is the way that we sort of manage our place in the world. So maybe if you wanted to, and of course for me, you know, Pixar is just so amazing in terms of narrative and story and telling those emotional stories. So maybe you could talk about a little about chaos and ordering our world, and how we how we use stories emotionally to kind of deal with the unknowns.
I love that. Yeah, that was fun having a conversation with you about chaos, because it's, you know, in a sense how, you know, as a producer or as a person who puts together creative teams to tell stories, you know, it is about, on a day-to-day basis, sort of managing that chaos. But I think that's also, as you and I were sort of talking about, it's also maybe how we, one way where we sort of like manage our lives is we're trying to make sense of things. And maybe that's why we go to books and why we go to stories and why we go to, you know, storytellers, whether those be visual storytellers, you know, in a rectangle, you know, old school, or to some of this community, a more interactive way in, you know, gaming, or even immersively inside of a story in VR, or inside of an experience. And through my work, which is primarily, almost exclusively, been in sort of the animation community and world, has had world creation sort of at its core. You know, you're making something from absolutely nothing. And so from that standpoint, I've always just sort of been in awe. And for me, if you can kind of make a career out of being in awe of the people you work with, well, then it's just endless, right? You'll never be bored. There'll never be enough, you know, that you've done or accomplished. Just to give a little bit of background, I'm originally from Texas and I moved to LA. And I always say that maybe it was in that journey, but the wind blew me into animation. I didn't intend to be in that industry, but there I landed, and inside of a small boutique studio, and sort of started learning some more fundamentals, or the fundamentals of sort of character animation, and along with experimental animation, where we are sort of literally just putting things in front of a camera and moving them, you know, for a living. Well, barely a living at that time, but it was a living. And then that led to a phone call from some friends who were working at Pixar. And that was when, so long ago, really now, where you had to kind of, you know, tell people, you couldn't make the assumption that people knew what Pixar was. And I got a job there running a short film division, and met some lifelong friends, and certainly people who sort of changed my life and taught me about, you know, the importance of storytelling, and again, that alchemy of creative and storytelling, but, you know, with real real constraints, real production constraints and timelines and things. And then that was a fantastic experience, and that led to sort of doing my own consulting work, and that ultimately led to working at Google, where, along with some wonderful colleagues, some of them from Pixar, actually, and I have to give a shout out to my good friend Jan Pinkova, who has been a actual mentor and teacher for me in that story regard. He put together, along with a woman named Regina Dugan and me and some others, all too many and all important to mention, put together a sort of a storytelling group inside of Google, that we called Google Spotlight Stories. And we were able to experiment really in storytelling and in immersive storytelling. And, you know, that's when I started understanding really even more so the importance of the audience and your agency as an audience person, as part of a story, because there was some interactivity in those things. And then that was several years, and we had a lot of fun projects, and got to go to some fancy parties and things like that, where there was wonderful recognition of the work. And then that's led to some other, back into some other short form work that I'm doing right now with Unreal Engine and Epic Games, where the emergence of game engine and real time capabilities into media and entertainment has become really important, and I think is certainly where the future of storytelling is headed from an audience standpoint, but from a creator standpoint. So with that, maybe I'll take a breath and back over to you. I hope that wasn't too long.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And a couple things came to mind. So I'm a primarily live action filmmaker, and one thing I love is when I'm on set and nature intervenes. So in my script, it's supposed to be sunny and it's raining, and I get to shoot, and it adds another dimension, or some unexpected things happen, or before the shoot, I'm listening to the actors, because we have the sound like connected, and they're just chatting, and then I'll be like, I like that, let's like use that. And so in animation and gaming, you there's not that chaotic accident that you can integrate into the work. Like everything is pre-thought out, everything is pre-planned. And so what is do you have anything to say about that experience of really, when you create every little tiny aspect of that, but at the same time, I don't know, what is it not to have that? Because that's something that excites me about.
Oh, that I think that's just a great question. Because in animation, I think, again, I'm not an animator. It's magic how it comes together. Still, to me, I'm in awe, like I mentioned. But you're right. Wait, where's the improv? Where's that? And I think most animators are actors at their heart, right? And actors understand improv and the value of improv. And so how does that moment get captured in that real sort of more stringent, path to what's finally on the screen? And I think you're right. It has to be, maybe that's where the birth of the accident might happen, an accidental edit or an accidental vocalization or something you discover, but then that is sort of iterated on, in a way that, to a polished image. There's also an assembly line feature that is both good and reliable, and is hard. And I think real time is disrupting to in a big way, to the filmmaking, especially in animation filmmaking process, where I hope that because of that, maybe we can get some more of that unexpected magic and improv, into the final product. For example, again, with real time, a lot of animation is motion captured, and not to plug, but definitely to brag, some of the work that Unreal is doing in Epic with their metahumans. There is technology now, and it's only going to get better, where you can not only motion capture, but capture facial capture, and have an experience with a character, hopefully an appealing one, a great one. And if it's puppeted by a human being, by someone who is, emotionally available, is a storyteller, is an actor, you can have this experience, and it's all in real time. So in a sense, not that, the rain could affect that moment in time, that story, that could then go down and just in history as the story. Or again, just improv. You can just, just like a good Saturday Night Live skit, when something goes wrong, I feel like I know that that's where things are headed. And it's not that this thing is headed in a certain way such that it replaces a traditional way of doing things. People still paint, but in addition to one informing the other. So I hope I think that's where we're going.
Yeah, so that gaming space is going to be that place where these little accidents and main narratives, side narratives sort of happen, right? And maybe more community, multiverse. Maybe you could speak about the gaming community, because we spoke about that as being quote unquote generous as a lot.
Yeah, well, yeah. It does seem like, my experience with that community and the tools that they use, the secret sauce there is community, because people share what they've learned freely, and I find that really fascinating. They're not keeping their artistic secrets to themselves, right? And that's part of what I mean by generosity. And again, back in Unreal and in that engine, and in, to that technology, it's very rewarding to one's curiosity, your artistic curiosity, because it wasn't made as a filmmaker's tool. So as a filmmaker, storyteller, you're going in through that portal, that creation portal, and it's just different. And it's not trying to be something else. And so I think, again, to the chaos and the alchemy, that seems to be the go-to word for us. I think that's where some interesting things are going in. Certainly that's where potentially, the birth of, or the promise of the metaverse starts kind of coming more into focus, I think, for me anyway, because of the real time, because it's already the kids understand it more than we do, right? They're already in immersive environments, playing, quickly having emotional exchanges with stories and talent and characters, and transactional, exchanges as well, right? I certainly don't know enough to get into that conversation, but that contextual training is happening, and that doesn't stop. That just grows and grows and grows. And I'm sure Carl will probably have more to say about that than I could possibly say. But it finally seems to me like the convergence of the two, where something new is born.
So the metaverse is a great link to Ed. So maybe we'll move to Ed, who's going to explain to us about immersive storytelling and these dome theaters, and we'll get to a little bit about empathy too, and storytelling and experiencing things from the bird's eye perspective. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Asmara. I thought I'd it's a little difficult to talk about the format that I work in, so I figured I'd put together some images. My space that I'm primarily focused on, in addition to VR, are the digital domes, or full dome theaters. It's kind of like a tour bus through VR, we find, but you can also have stand-up interactive experiences and whatnot. There's all different kinds of domes out there. Typically, we're distributing now to digital planetariums and giant screen cinemas. It's actually a bit of a market out there for the content that we're doing. But most of the events that we've done are pop-up domes, these temporary structures. There aren't a lot of arts and entertainment domes. In fact, there's like 2 or 3 in the world. And we've done large concert domes, large EDM parties. We created a holodome, designed a holodome for Vulcan, and we also produce original content, which has really led me to some interesting insights into immersive media and the power of immersion. These domes are coming. You have the MSG Sphere. It's a 17,500 foot digital dome theater with LED going up in Vegas as we speak, 2023 opening. Dome X is a LED dome from Evans and Sutherland, and other ones as well. So, but I kind of see the whole XR ecosystem, if you will, extended reality, being inclusive of augmented reality, digital domes, mixed reality experiences, where you're up and moving around, standing up and interacting, as sort of a different from virtual reality, where you're trying to block out your physical world and now enter into a completely synthetic space. So, one sort of forward-looking consequence is, the augmented and mixed reality is really approaching the holodeck, and virtual reality is somewhat approaching the matrix, where your body's floating in amniotic fluid, and there's cords hooked into your nervous system, but you're completely in cyberspace, hanging out with all your friends. It's a little dark imagery here. Apologies for that. It's not always so dark. But we're looking at multi-domeplex with a sit-down, stand-up, and walk-through type immersive event spaces. So the thing that's really come up for me is how this immersive media is in essence, you can think of it almost as digital pharmacology, which now expands the storyteller's palette, with these pharmacological effects. Some of these, you can get from television and film. Some of them are difficult, like awe, sense of awe is not something that you can generate as easily in film. Um, and there's all kinds of cool things you can do with evocative music, immersive visuals, narrative, haptics. We're looking at, in addition to a DJ and a VJ, we're looking at a touch jockey where you can actually start to share touch with an entire audience. So there's a very interesting things emerging in the future. I think the thing that for me is most interesting here, the digital domes, planetariums, and science centers have been traditionally used as cosmological cinema, and in fact now most of them or many of them have real-time 3D immersive environment, a model of the known universe built into the computers that you can fly through with a joystick, right? So it's this cosmological cinema, large scale structure of the universe, the solar system tours, and all these sorts of cool things that we do in the planetarium domes. But what interests me is what I call phenomenological cinema, where you're now entering the mind of a protagonist or seeing the world through other eyes. And this is something that it's really an emerging. I mean, it's done a lot in novels where you hear the story through the eyes of the protagonist. But here, what we can actually start to do is communicate ineffable brain states, sometimes by stimulating those brain states in the audience itself, which is quite cool. Like a Zen master teaching a student could take 7 years. Meditate on your breath for 7 years, and then finally you discover that brain state. We can accelerate those kinds of learnings now. Real world, I wanted to give a real world example. Mesmerica is a show that went into distribution a year and a half before COVID hit, and it's quite successful. I wanted to play part of a little trailer here just so you get a feeling for what this is all about. give you a feel for what we're up to here. And one thing I wanted to point out, we call this a visual musical journey with poetic narrative, but it's also a visual narrative. And the show's done quite well, grossed over 10 million. Selling 330,000 tickets. It's an hour-long show, and average ticket price is $30. So anyway, that's what I have to share. And
yeah, thank you. So I love this line about communicating the ineffable, because that's definitely what inspired me to want to be a filmmaker, because I felt that there were ways to communicate some feelings or experiences that it's different than reading it in a novel. I can get some hard-hitting emotions in a novel, but sometimes some little effervescent feelings or atmospheres or moods are what we get with film. So when we think about phenomenology, which is the idea that your subjective view of the world is the world. Um, and I noticed, and something that we talk about, you said, we need a Moore's law curve for wisdom. So how do you see these immersive experiences not being an opportunity to be escapist, where VR is not just escaping to another world, but actually giving you emotional tools to appreciate the relationships in the world, that the real world as well?
absolutely, that's a good point. And one of the things we've done is a lot of live performances, but also this is very much about an artist or somebody with a vision, a love for nature, or because you can actually use this format to show you the world through other eyes. And like film, you model behaviors and show expressions and feelings through emotional expressions and behaviors and dialogue. But it's almost like we're able to go a little step further, similar to music that evokes empathy or emotion, that we start to show you the world from the mind of another, memories or things like this. It's very interesting. But what you said about I guess empathy, right, is this ability to build bridges of multicultural understanding and to open minds, open hearts. I think the domes and immersive media give the storyteller expanded tool set for doing that.
Yeah, because we're all sort of learning how to get along and what it feels like to walk in someone else's shoes, so that we can, work together and collaborate together. And there's even companies forming around this. I shared a link about Praxis Labs, which I believe is using VR to sort of train employees in the workplace to create situations of understanding and greater cooperation. So I definitely see this as being a way forward, not just in entertainment, but also in our living environments and work environments as well. Do you have anything to speak about that, or?
Well, certainly, I think there's a number of different modalities. We think of it as cognitive, which is learning, and affective, which is feeling. And both of those can be combined for. I mean, VR has been used for many years for training, and I think it's a powerful tool for modeling behaviors and. As you said, helping people to understand those who are different, and neurodiversity is one of those things, and even going beyond just ordinary differences between people, but into things like disabilities, like what is it like to be, whether it's Asperger's or to have a hearing disability or a seeing disability or whatever like that. You can start to share what that's like and simulate it essentially.
Yeah, that's interesting. That just brings to mind, there was a cafe or museum exhibit in Prague when I was living there that was actually all blacked out. So you would walk through and actually have to interact with everything without the tool of sight. So yeah, that's definitely something that we can experience easier with VR. There's a question from the NT. Ed, can the dome format be paired with live theater, plays, one-person shows that are narrative-based?
Absolutely, and it's funny because I've always thought of the domes as immersive cinema. We put up a dome in downtown LA, which was up for 10 years, the Vortex Dome, on Studio Lot, on Los Angeles Cine Studios. And really what came in was less cinema and more live performers. So I think we've done every genre that's out there practically except comedy. We've not done a comedy, but ballet. We got a grant to produce a ballet, and it was just incredible. People were flipping out over it. But theater, musicals, spectaculars, and what's interesting about the format is that a Cirque production has scores of performers and staff to run. We can push a lot of the spectacle of like a Cirque production into pixels and maybe a couple or four performers or whatever live on stage project the immersive imagery of a virtual set and put the live performers in that set. What becomes really interesting now is when you merge that in with the metaverse, and the live performers on stage are also appearing in the metaverse, and the metaverse is appearing on the dome as a infinitely large environment projected around you, right? So we start to bridge these worlds together. So in that sense, the dome might be thought of as an XR stage for live performance, both in person and virtual.
Which is what we all have now experienced and we actually like. So to be able to host in-person events where people can, come in regardless of where they are or what their mobility is to join in and participate is really, I think, something that we've all realized we don't want to leave behind that we learned in COVID. So
I gave a presentation to a couple of years ago to the Canadian Arts Summit, and these were a lot of theater, board chairs and like that, and directors, and they were flipping out because they said, "Oh my God, all this virtual stuff. We're trying to figure out like we." Make eye contact with an audience, and that's what feeds us, and we haven't figured out how to do that in VR. But what you're doing, you could put us on a stage and we make eye contact with the audience, and then project the immersive environment around us that we can then interact with. So there's a lot of interest in the format.
mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Ed. Let's move on to Carl. And Carl has interesting perspectives about how gaming affects the narrative and storytelling. So if you wanted to go ahead, Carl, the baton is in your hand.
Sure, thank you. So, when it comes to interactive storytelling, gaming has a very unique sort of position in the when it comes to different forms of media for storytelling. There's a great stand-up bit by a comic named Dara O'Brien. He's from Ireland. He talks about how compared to like so if you're reading like a book and you're 3 chapters in, the book doesn't suddenly quiz you on the major themes of the book, and if you get the questions wrong, it shuts the book and you can't read anymore. And like if you're listening to a music or like something, it doesn't really ask you to like dance to the music, and if you can't dance well enough, it shuts the record off, whatever. But in gaming, if you're playing a game and you're not good enough to beat like a boss, you're kind of denied content from the rest of the game. And so that's just one of the ways that the storytelling in games is very different from other medium, because the player has so much control over the pacing and where they go, especially in more modern games where it's going to open, like kind of the term is sandbox, where the player can go anywhere in any order they want to for the most part. And so if you're trying to tell a certain story, a certain pacing and certain emotional builds and certain normal arcs that you try and tell like in a movie or TV, if the player isn't in the right spot at the right time, you're going to totally miss out on the sort of arcs you're trying to build. So it's very interesting to see how games go about solving some of these challenges, um, and still kind of balance the gameplay with the story. And that's just kind of in the single player standpoint. One of the games series I think has done it really well as a very creative solution. If you've heard of the Dark Souls series by From Software, I believe is the company that makes them. They do a very minimalist storytelling approach where they kind of give you a basic setting and then don't really tell you much of the story. The story's kind of immersed in the environments and in the other enemies and characters you interact with, but they don't tell you about have a bunch of like cutscenes that tell you the story. They just kind of let you get immersed as you want in the story, but they don't kind of force it down your throat. So it's a great way to kind of balance give player autonomy and still have a rich lore that people can look into if they really want to. So there's just a lot more challenges when you're dealing with a player that's not necessarily going to do things in the order you want them to do it.
And so what does that mean for, we spoke a little bit about how you can't pace things. Like a lot of drama and having emotional impact is through the storyteller being able to pace. But in the game, the gamer is the one sort of pacing. And there's the main storyline we spoke about, but then when you can go off and have like a side story. So how do you do you see that then as the gamer writing the story, or sort of what do you how does that affect you as a storyteller? Like, what would you like to see? And as a gamer, like what do you think is missing, or sort of what could be added?
So I think when it comes, so the one big genre that's usually very heavy on story is role playing games, or RPGs, and usually there's a common kind of story breaking moment in any of those games where you're about to fight the last boss, the big bad, who the story is built up as this kind of calamity that's going to destroy the world, sort of thing. And in the story, you're supposed to go like right there immediately and fight the boss and win. But usually at that point in the game, you can go do a bunch of side quests, or kind of need to do a bunch of leveling up and other more kind of gameplay related things that don't really relate to the main story. At which point, if you're thinking it from a narrative perspective, the bad guy's kind of waiting around, like looking at his watch, like where's the heroes I'm supposed to fight. So it kind of breaks the immersion. But there's some ways of, I think the solution to those sorts of things from a storytelling perspective is to work with the people designing the gameplay side of things, and making it so that you don't need to do as much of the grinding and like some of the other gameplay elements and kind of make sure that, I mean, there's ways of kind of restricting player choice that still gives them the sense of autonomy, but allows the narrative to sync up more with the gameplay. Um, that's one solution, and there's also just other ones like, all right, what some of the big games that are really popular right now are really multiplayer games where the narrative of like a certain round of, think of like Fortnite, for example, there's no real like scripted narrative, but is the narrative comes out between the player interactions and who interacts with who, and sort of they kind of make their own story up. It's kind of like an improv, kind of on stage. Like you're just going to throw a bunch of actors on stage and see what happens, and this with certain parameters. And so I think a lot of the really interesting kind of fun stories, at least from the player perspective, where they're like what they'll share with their friends later on is how they do when playing like in interactive multiplayer games that are not just fun for them to play, but also people like are doing a lot of streaming on Twitch or other platforms where people will watch someone play this game, and you aren't usually playing games that are like a single player narrative. It's really seeing the multiplayer story evolve, as kind of, because you don't know what's going to happen. There's so many more variables and different actors and stuff, actors and players that from the viewer's perspective as like a third party watching, it's really interesting because it's like an improv scene because you don't know what's going to happen, and it's very dynamic and fun. So I think a lot of the kind of shared experience stories you're seeing in gaming are seen on Twitch by people streaming these multiplayer games, and and there's fewer, I think, these single player experiences being made because the multiplayer ones have just a lot more potential for kind of the social interaction and that group story where everyone's kind of feels like they're involved in what's happening.
So that spectacle, when watching someone playing a game becomes as interesting as watching a basketball match or watching a film.
Yeah.
And is like one interesting thing. And another interesting is games like Minecraft. And I know Zelda was the first to sort of create that whole environment experience. So Minecraft doesn't really have it puts you in a you could say it's a situation. So when I was learning to make stories, it's like you have your situation that sparks the whole. So Minecraft sort of has a situation, but it doesn't have the drama or the narrative, but is extremely popular. So what do you think that the people creating the games, like how to balance that, building that atmosphere, but also being specific enough but open enough to inspire this?
Yeah, Minecraft is a definitely a phenomena that is very fascinating, and so there, like, the initial, like, Minecraft 1.0 first release, didn't really have any story. There's no real point. You kind of had to make your own fun. You had to kind of come up with your own activities. There were certain mechanics built into the game, but it wasn't like a main goal. It really didn't have like a tutorial. Like, it didn't tell you what to do. You just kind of dropped into the world and you had to figure it out. But they did eventually build in kind of like a end boss you have to work towards. But what was great is because it basically was like, it's kind of like a digital version of Legos. I heard it described when it first came out, and so there's a lot of people, like, well, a lot of like people streaming or making content for like YouTube, where they kind of came up with their own games where they used the in-game mechanics and creative tools to build little games they could play with each other and stream those sorts of things. So it was this kind of a big sandbox and kind of toolbox where you could make a variety of different activities. Like, they have ones where you have to kind of like gather a certain amount of resources first, or who could like mine to the bottom of the world first. All these different sorts of competitions that made kind of mini games inside the main game, or people made like, there's some tools where you can kind of create little computers or systems where it would trigger other events. People made like kind of like recreated, like, I think someone recreated like Space Invaders in Minecraft, because you can build kind of like computers and other, like, so there's people kind of made their own games and these sorts of things, which is very interesting. And people
Yeah,
also have modded it a bunch. So there's
and that's interesting with Unreal. We can jump back to Karen, and please feel free, Karen or Ed, give you space now to jump in with any, if you've had any thoughts listening to the other panelists, because a lot of what I think it's Unity or Unreal Games is giving software to architects, to filmmakers, and Carl, in our discussion, you talked about one show, Rooster Teeth, I think, that was using gaming software to create films, and so that seems the sort of ubiquity of gaming software in other industries. Maybe if any, maybe
it's one of basically the first kind of video content, like online video content creation companies, is a company called Rooster Teeth. They started with a one show called Red versus Blue, where they took the Halo game engine on Xbox, and they realized there's a little, like, kind of glitch where if you kind of had the character look down, because normally the character has a gun in front of them the entire time, but if you let it look down and held it long enough, it'd come up and the gun wasn't there. You basically use one character as a camera and use the other characters in the game, and it kind of record voiceover and have the heads move up and down. They basically started telling narratives in a game engine. And so at the beginning, they're kind of limited by what the game engine could do. But as sequels came out and the game production company kind of caught wind and realized it was a cool thing, they kind of built in more tools that allowed for narrative storytelling inside this game engine. And then the more recent seasons used kind of the motion capture and had more customized animation mixed in with the main game engine content. So and I think there's just like Karen was saying, there's more, as the technology gets cheaper and more available, there'll be even more opportunities for live action animation interaction. So I know there's a tool that by Adobe called Character Animator, where you can build a 2D puppet rig in Adobe Illustrator and set it up right in Character Animator and use a webcam and like do a live stream. But basically, it's like animated character. When you talk, its mouth moving, like you move the eyes, your eyes, and the camera sees it and moves the character's eyes, and like you have this whole live animated character that's interacting with people in real time, but it's through a webcam and a personal computer and stuff. And so I think that's still just 2D, but I think with the sort of stuff Karen's was talking about, it shouldn't be long till you have a fully like 3D character that's interacting with a Twitch stream or like interacting with someone in a game where instead of just the avatar that you're running around with, you could basically like if you're talking, then your character is going to talk and the mouse going to move up and say what you're saying, and um, the technology can really get immersed in games, in multiplayer, and have just much more. You could even combine some of the stuff Ed was talking about, where then like first generation like haptic stuff, where you wear like a vest that basically if you get punched, like it feels like you got punched in the chest, like you make the really immersive, like not just the sight and sound, but the feelings and stuff, like actual like physical sensation. So I think combining gaming with the sort of live act, like the motion capture, and then the immersive technology Ed combined is talking about, merging all three into the gaming experience could really get like an immersive experience that is not as close to kind of like the Matrix or kind of Ready Player One, that is fastly becoming just kind of science and not science fiction, you know?
Thank you so much. Karen, do you want to jump in and then Ed on that topic?
There's so much there.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'll just speak from, you know, sort of an observational point of view too, of what I see storytellers doing. And, you know, and the intersection of maybe real time in games to sort of what Carl was emphasizing as well, which is there's just this nowness to it all. Someone framed it that way to me the other day, and I was like, "Ooh, that's totally right." And that's from a sorry, my dog. It's a buy one get one free situation here. She comes with me. That is, you know, in the writing and creating process in a game engine, a real-time game engine, there's a nowness to it that's so cool, and a sort of low risk collaborative, opportunity to it. And I think once you make this stuff and you're actually like broadcasting it, especially even if you're broadcasting it in real time, there's a nowness to that also, right? And that gets back to sort of that, improv, setup, and where some fun alchemy could perhaps happen. And you just know it if you're doing it and playing it, and you also know it if you're receiving it as an audience, person and member, and that you're okay if it's not necessarily following the exact rules of storytelling, because it feels like it's still being crafted. I mean, some of the work that Ed was showing too, of the frame of that is sort of like this poetry is exactly right, because it's emotional, but it feels like there's humanity behind it. I don't know, Ed, did you have something? Did that resonate?
Oh, well, what's happening here is quite incredible, and I'm constantly blown away with the new tech and tools that are coming out. If you notice the Microsoft Mesh demo, where you have a mixed reality, people who are being volumetrically scanned and put into the virtual environment, interacting with avatars, interacting with somebody who's present in the room, and they're all collaborating on the same thing. If you haven't seen the Unreal 5 demo, check that out. It's an example of where the tech is going. So yeah, it's some years ago, I mean, people started saying that we're not storytellers, we're world builders, and that is literally becoming true. I think film, television, gaming are starting to merge into a more sort of a seamless experience as time goes on. It's we live in interesting times.
So thank you all. And now I thought we would open it up if anyone has any questions. We do have one question that's written in, so I'll ask that. And then if people want to, I think, raise their hand, Arabella can, there's a way to ask your question through audio for the attendees. So if anyone's interested in that, I think you can raise your hand, or you can just write your question in the text. So I'll ask this one. How should future storytellers be preparing with the potential of Apple new glasses or mainstream mixed reality devices? How do you train for this? Do you go to film school or learn Unreal? What are the most coveted skills?
I'm going to answer that because I know Andrew Gordon. Hello, Andrew Gordon. It's good to sort of see you or imagine what you look like across the way. So, I mean, I think there's several ways you can answer this question. It depends on who's doing the asking. So, I mean, I think it's still very fundamental. Read everything, get your hands on everything, watch everything, give it a try yourself, develop your own point of view, right? Develop, because people are looking for voice. And that's what we're responding to. And the voice can come through music, it can come through traditional storytelling, it can come through gaming, but I think that that's what then we go look for. I always sort of have a quote that I follow in life that's, when I have questions, I go to the artists. And that's from Thelma Golden, who is senior director, I'm sorry, of the Studio Museum at Harlem. And I just love the simplicity of that, right? Because it was not maybe that artist or storyteller is going to answer the question, but they can hold the mirror up, right? So anyway, that's one cohort, I think, answer. And the other one is this: look, there's all this future in storytelling because of this technology. So definitely pick it up. It's all for free. Unreal Engine's for free. You can just, might not be as easy as this, but you could just get going, right? There's so many things that are free. There's so many tutorials. There's so many people doing work and putting it out there from a tutorial standpoint, but also from an asset standpoint. You know, there's just so much out there that's just within arm's reach and relatively easy to get to. Mix that in with a little hustle, and I think that you've got something. So I would say, again, sort of the classics, and then, yes, of course, picking up the tools. And you don't have to be afraid of new tools. Sort of speaking to myself here, because some of this stuff seems, and it is, really hard and kind of made for geniuses, but you can just get to what you need out of it, right? Here's my entry point to a tool. Here's the 3 things I need to do to get to a result, and then you can build on that. So I wouldn't let some gnarly technology get in the way of, you know, learning something.
And you mentioned to me this $100 million EPIC grant, right? So there's actually grants to build on, was it Unity or Unreal?
Unreal, yeah.
Unreal, right. So there's opportunities to get funding to develop work too.
Yep, that is out there. And there, you know, that's, you know, again, if you look for it, if you're open, you know, there are those avenues out there. And I think that certainly goes into my comment earlier about the generosity of this industry, this future of storytelling industry, where there are different and maybe even less gatekeepers. There's just not any time for them. You know, you can just kind of get direct to your audience. And that's been going on, you know, for quite some time. So that path is pretty established and pretty low friction compared to, you know, your traditional Hollywood or publishing from a book publishing standpoint.
There's also a lot more women in VR. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not quite sure why that is, but you know, that's something that I've noticed.
Yeah. I always kind of hope that when something new is brewing up, it's an opportunity, because the you know, there's new spots there, right? There's, you know, there aren't old networks there, right? So I think that that's a component of it.
So we also have a question: are there any plans to do the Digital Dome experience in London, UK, Ed?
Yeah, actually, there is a Dome Fest UK, a full dome film festival coming up in October. You know, the London Planetarium was taken over by Madame Tussauds. You know, you can see a pretty cool show there. I think it's still playing. I think it was a Marvel based show, but it's more of a theme park ride. But yeah, the domes are coming. I know that MSG is planning a sphere in London if they can get the neighbors to allow it as well.
Wonderful. So I don't think we have any more questions. Anyone want to say a last parting thoughts before we wrap up? Some words of final words.
I would just add to that the Leicester, UK is one of the top dome film producers, studios up there, and definitely it's the National Space Center in Leicester. There's a number of domes in the UK though.
Carl or
I
Karen?
just wanted to say I thought it was really cool to hear Karen and Ed's perspective on the storytelling and how the technology is in changing the way stories are told and the formats and the technology. I'd love to stay in touch and see how we could collaborate and make some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I second that. And thanks for putting us together. I'm kind of curious, quick lightning round. What is everybody, hoping for a year from now in their given fields? Asmara, no, Carl, you go first.
Well, my specific field for my business is like corporate animation and explainer animation. I think there's going to be a lot more technology that needs to be explained to people that don't have master's degrees in engineering and that sort of stuff. And also same more like for biotech and healthcare. I think there's going to be a lot more. I think people a lot more aware of their health than ever before. I think there's going to be a lot more need for people to be better informed about how to be preventive in their care. And so I think a lot of like the telemedicine, there's going to be a lot more need to explain things using video and animation remotely. So I think that there will be a lot more storytelling and explanations needed to help people cope with the speed at which change is happening in the tech and biotech worlds, and just try and wrap their heads around with it without needing to get extra degrees from university. That sort of thing.
Totally. Ed, lightning round. You go fast.
Sure. Well, that's easy for me. I want to see domes going up all over the world. But I will say, in closing, I think immersive media is a powerful format. I mean, these are the most powerful media delivery systems on the planet. A wideband interface to the brain, and I think it's really important to be mindful how you use the tech. You can evoke a very positive emotions. You can also cause PTSD. Anything that you would see in the real world, we can now simulate that to higher and higher degrees. So let's use these formats for good.
So I want to see cinema cafes everywhere. I want little local cinemas where I want it to be as easy to go as it is now to go to get a coffee, and that you can go make a film, that all the resources are there, and that you can also share work like screen your work with your community, and that it's all linked up globally so we can see work from other places as well. But that in-person sort of local mini studios is what I want to see.
I love that.
Community creativity.
+1 on that for sure. And just the continued diversification of, voices and shows out there. But I would like to go see them. I want to go commune and be with people and have things happen by happenstance, and, and have that reflect back into the art.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Thank you to everyone who attended. And a little correction, I did share my films at Princeton. I was never a professor at Princeton. That was just a little error in my intro, but we've done a lot of other things. So anyway, I just wanted to correct that. So thank you to everyone. And, I think it's a time to be creative, and I hope we all find the space for that and continue to do what we love to do. So yeah, thanks and good night.
Thanks, guys. Great panel, and thanks for everyone for attending.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Asmara.
Thank you.